Hello everybody, welcome to our AHDB dairy webinar, which is focusing on dairy herd mobility. Today we're joined by Nick Bell, who's a veterinary specialist and has a particular interest in hoof health and reducing lameness in UK dairy herds. Thanks for joining us, Nick. We also have with us Grant Hartman, who is a dairy farmer from Carmarthen, who has been working with Nick in recent months to improve the mobility of his herd. Grant's going to share with us some of his experiences since working with an independent mobility scorer and Nick to implement the Healthy Feet Light programme, which is launching this week, a new tool from AHDB Dairy. So thanks for taking the time to join us, Grant.
Thank you.
Before we move into the meat of the webinar, I'll just run through a few housekeeping notifications then. So all attendees are muted, so we can't hear you. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube to watch afterwards. For those of you who are interested in collecting Dairy Pro points, please provide your farm name and your Dairy Pro number. Your name, your farm name, Dairy Pro number in the message box to receive your points. If you don't have your Dairy Pro number to hand, send your email address and we can contact you directly. Discussion is encouraged, so there's a questions box, but you're very welcome to post comments into there, and if we can make this as interactive as possible, we will. So to type in a comment or a question, you'll see that there is an orange box with an arrow in it on the right hand side of your screen, and if you pop that arrow out, a box opens, and as you scroll down there's a little icon that says questions, and you can type your questions and comments in there. So we look forward to hearing from you throughout the webinar. So I think without further ado we will hand over to Grant, who's going to share with us a little bit of his Healthy Feet Light journey.
Great, thank you, Jamie. I'll just put some slides up. Hopefully they can all be seen. So my name's Grant Hartman, a dairy farmer from Carmarthen, family farm where we farm at Trebersed farm. We milk 600 Holstein cows that are currently averaging just over 12,500 litres of milk per year. We've also got 500 young stock, and can you still see the slides?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Sorry, they disappeared from me.
Oh, that's not fair.
Sorry, back to you can still see the slides again. So yes, 500 young stock, and due to TB restrictions that we're currently on, we've got 100 beef cattle as well. I'm also an elected board member on the Muller Milk Group, and a dairy business consultant specialising in technical and business management consultancy in West Wales. So what I'm going to talk about, just some farm details about Trebersed, our current technical performance, got a couple of farm images just so you can sort of visualise the farm, what we've got here at Trebersed, why we've embraced the Healthy Feet Light programme with Nick Bell. I want to talk a little bit about the grooving that we've carried out at Trebersed, followed by the matting that we've put down in some strategic areas, including the Parlour, and then just sort of summarised by looking at the reasons for embracing healthy feet. So current performance, the cows as of yesterday, we record every Monday, averaging 37 litres of milk sold, butter fat of 4.01 and protein of 3.41%. Which gives us a combined weight of fat and protein of 2.75 kilograms per day. So these cows are they're working hard, and currently performance we're particularly pleased about. Replacement rate is 26%, probably a little lower than maybe I would like, on the basis that we are under TB restrictions. So we've got to be quite careful with our culling policy at the moment because we're losing cows to TB. We've grown the business significantly over the last 15 years. So 2005, the annual production was 1.5 million litres, coming from 160 cows, averaging just over 9,600 litres, to 2020, when we sold just over 7 million litres, which came from 580 cows, averaging just over 12,000 litres. And when I talk about the yield of 12,000 litres, that is the amount of milk that's gone to the dairy divided by the number of cows on the holding. It's certainly not a yield derived from NMR or Holstein UK. It is a milk sold figure that I'm quite passionate about, because that's the figure that pays the bills. 2021, we're on course to sell just over 7.6 million litres, having achieved our target of 12,500 litres. Just some images of the farm so you can visualise what we've got here at Trebersed. This is our dry cow accommodation. So it's a 2-row barn, on the basis that these cows are, in my opinion, the most important cows on the farm. If we look after these, everything else will look after itself. So the cows are housed in with wide passageways. Everything is on sand bedding. That was a major turning point to our business when we went to sand. You can see the wide passageways and plenty of loafing space. Again, that's the external image of the dry cow building. The cleared site that you can see in the foreground of that photo is where we've put up a new, what is now a 400 cow building. Particularly like this photo, every cow lying down just shows the comfort of sand beds. We try to embrace technology. You can see the long day lighting system that was installed, providing 200 lux of light for 16 hours a day, followed by 8 hours of darkness. We believe that that certainly helps melatonin production and feed intake, and ultimately milk production. But we haven't got all new buildings, and we, like all farms, have got a range of old buildings. And this is just some of the accommodation that we've got. You can see old Newton rig cubicles. You can see the narrow feed pass, the narrow walkway passage. But we have tried to improve these buildings with the aim of reducing lameness. Lameness was particularly prevalent in these older buildings. So we carried out a cow signals exercise with a local cow signal specialist, which significantly improved this building. It included taking out the automatic scrapers, converting to sand beds, knocking out some concrete walls. So in front of these cows, you can see here, it was an old silage clamp. That wall was removed to provide plenty of lunging space. Little jobs like the head rail was just increased by that small section of box metal. So some pretty cheap improvements, which significantly improved the welfare of the cows in these buildings. So I just wanted to show that we have invested in new buildings, but like all farms, we have got some old buildings as well that we try to do the best of. So why Healthy Feet Light? Why did we embrace this program? Well, it came about following a conversation that I had with Nick at the beginning of this year, when the number of casualty cows that we were experiencing at Trebersed rose to an unsatisfactory level. So in winter months, typically between 0 and 2 casualties a month, and by casualties I'm referring to cows that slip, do the splits, broken legs, etc. And as every sort of spring and summer, the numbers in April and May started to rise again due to the concrete yards becoming slippery. We hadn't done any grooving at the time, and it was in April when we lost, April and May when we lost 5 cows per month. We deemed this as just not acceptable. And we wanted to do some grooving, but it was in the back of my mind that the old-fashioned grooving that we have got some of in the old buildings wasn't really good for long-term hoof care of the cow. So I contacted Nick just to sort of talk about what would be the best types of grooving, and from there we started discussing Healthy Feet Light and more topics. So probably at this stage, I'd like to hand over to Nick, who will talk a little bit more about the Healthy Feet Light program.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, I'll share my screen with you, and hopefully you'll be able to see my slides in a moment. So oh, if I
Yeah, that's perfect, Nick.
great, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Grant, as well. So it's a great pleasure to be talking on this subject. So the conversation I had with Grant, it was sort of March or April last year when we were chatting about the grooving, and at that point we were in lockdown and a lot of visits were on hold. But I said once we were out of the current restrictions, it would be nice to come out and take a look at the farm, and Grant kindly invited me over. And I said, well, probably running through the healthy feet light might be the appropriate level of intervention that would be helpful at this stage. So I'm going to talk through the Healthy Feet Light, which is a recent addition to the Healthy Feet program. The Healthy Feet program is almost 10 years old now. We set it up off the back of the Healthy Feet project, which was a research project we ran at Bristol University between 2006 and 2010. And what both Healthy Feet program and Healthy Feet Light have in common is a structured approach to dealing with tackling the subject of cow mobility and foot health. So to give you a brief overview, I'm going to just run through the stages of the Healthy Feet program and Healthy Feet Light. So as I say, it's a structured program and is aimed at really being quite systematic in looking at all the aspects that could be contributing to lameness on a dairy farm, and then prioritizing and honing in on the key things that are most likely to make a difference in the short, medium and long term. So it typically starts with an initial questionnaire and brief interview, just to cover off a few basic questions to get a thorough understanding. Now, I knew Grant from previous meetings, and I knew a little bit about the farm, and I did this in a fairly informal way. I don't think, Grant, you were even aware that the process was taking place, because as we walked around the farm, I asked a few questions. I got a feel for what they were doing and where they wanted to be, and the targets were set in that way. Fundamental to sort of measuring success is to gain a baseline mobility score, and I truly believe there's no room for guesswork in our industry. We cannot afford to be guessing at what we're doing, and also by having a measurable outcome such as a mobility score, we're able to track progress, plot some trends, understand what's working, but also understand what isn't working. So it's ultimately a means for Grant to hold me to account a little bit, because I've got to make sure that this Healthy Feet program or Healthy Feet Light runs as smoothly and effectively as possible. So I think it's a really important aspect of the Healthy Feet program and Healthy Feet Light. We have a series of checklists which are really to benefit me as the advisor. I'm wanting to make sure I look at everything and systematically cover everything off. So I'm going to show you one or two of those checklists, just so you get a feel for what's involved with that. Within the Healthy Feet program, we would go into the trimming skills, treatment protocols, and the recording in great detail, and that's an element that we've trimmed out, excuse the pun, trimmed out of the Healthy Feet Light in the interests of time. And of course, a lot of farms have done a lot of in-house foot trimming training, or sent people away on courses, have done a lot to revise their treatment protocols, so that it's just it's something that can be bolted on in a separate exercise, just to streamline the Healthy Feet Light. The Healthy Feet program also involves quite an in-depth farm team brainstorming exercise, and that's ideally done off-site. And there's also a step that we skip within the Healthy Feet Light. With the Healthy Feet Light, we would do an action plan, and that's really in the Healthy Feet program. The culmination of the brainstorming exercise is that we generate an action plan. Within the Healthy Feet Light, we would do that after I'd walked around the farm and understood what was going on with the farm, and we'd sort of highlight some of the obvious priorities. That would be followed up then a few weeks later, certainly within 3 months ideally, with a supportive phone call just to see how things were progressing and maybe to refine some of the action points agreed in the action plan. And then within the full Healthy Feet program, we would undertake quarterly mobility scoring with quarterly progress reviews just to see how things were moving on. And that's an element that we skip within the Healthy Feet Light. Within the Healthy Feet Light, we'd be focused on a review after 12 months. So overall, the level of intensity is a little bit different between the two types of delivery mechanism within the Healthy Feet program. It's 3 visits with involving 3 progress reviews, which would take at least 10 hours to deliver for me as the advisor or facilitator, I should say. We're not, my main role is to facilitate improvement. The Healthy Feet Light would really be focused on that initial single visit with a quick recap and review. So that's the overview of the 2 approaches that we've got within the Healthy Feet program. So on the initial walk around the farm at Trebersed with Grant and Jen, the farm manager, we talked about a number of things, and I think it was probably at this point that the idea that the team wanted to be at a target of 90% mobility index within 5 years. So the mobility index is the percentage of cows that are 0 or 1 on the AHDB mobility score. So the cows that are walking well or would have maybe mild impairment. So they are not our lame cows. And I thought that I thought that was an ambitious target, but completely achievable for the farm that the facilities and the team that we've got at Trebersed. So I thought and it was good to set a realistic time frame. I always say to people that foot health improvement is a 4 to 5 year journey. You won't achieve miraculous results overnight, and a lot of the things you're changing today will only manifest in 2nd and 3rd lactation. So you need to take a long-term view over foot health improvement. So we recruited a ROMS accredited mobility scorer, and ROMS is the organisation that oversees the quality assurance of mobility scoring. It's a relatively new organisation, and at the moment we oversee the delivery of the quality of the instruction that goes on for new recruits onto the register of mobility scorers, and there's an annual 25 cow test just to make sure people are scoring at roughly the right level. And we recruited Anna, who was on the register, and she did an extra standardization exercise with me, and I could tell that she is what we call a high sensitivity scorer. So she is spotting the very subtle behavioural changes we would associate with the lesions causing lameness. Now that does create what looks like a high level of score 2s and 3s. So the mobility index for Trebersed started off last June at that initial mobility score at 59%, which can be a little bit demoralizing. But with that high sensitivity score, it really does enable you to pinpoint the things that are making the biggest difference or the things that are contributing to lameness. And by having that level of scrutiny, I think you can really see the things that are going to make the biggest impact. By looking at the lesion records, we're able to plot on the lesion map or the lameness map the priorities for improvement. Now, initially, I didn't have access to anything other than paper records, so I had a quick look, and I think in discussion with the farm team, white lines looked like they were the major priority, and by that we would then focus on the robustness of the foot, so hoof shape, horn quality, and digital cushion, but also forces on the feet, and those would be the 2 main priorities that we would look at. Walking around the farm, I was able to sort of refer to various checklists, and we've got here in front of us the checklists for the forces on the feet, which would involve looking at cubical comfort, cubical dimensions, and I was quite quickly able to establish cubical comfort was actually very good. And that was down to the fact that we've got deep bed sand plenty of cubicles with open forward lunge space and really good dimensions, and the cows were showing us that the cow comfort was very good. So there were some elements that I could quite quickly establish as being gold standard and really positive. But one of the downsides to sand is that it's abrasive and it can lead to a polished surface on the concrete, and that's really what I was observing here. Excuse the quality of the picture. I wasn't expecting to do a presentation on this 9 months later, but you can probably just spot the glaze. This was the concrete in the fresh group, and you could see that the surface texture had really been worn away by that sand. So sand has many advantages from the cow comfort, but can be quite a challenge from the end of the surface point of view. So we continued our discussion about grooving. Here's one type of grooving pattern, and this is the AccuStep, which can be floated into new concrete. We talked about that being a possibility for any new concrete going forward. It's a 19mm wide groove, at least 10mm deep. And what you can see here is the foot is always in contact with the groove, and the groove dimensions enable the moisture to be pulled away from the surface of the concrete, but improves the surface that the cow is walking on. So that was one topic we talked about, but grooving was well underway by the time I got out there in that early summer period. And here we can see that some of the grooving that had already been done, and you can see the cow's foot in contact with that grooving, and that was working very well to achieve better grip for the cows, in my opinion. But of course, I like to see the data to confirm that was happening. So in walking around the farm, I like to follow the route that the cows go. So I followed the cows as they came from the cubicles. There was plenty of space for those cows to drift towards the collecting yard, and the cows were walking in a way that I thought was very positive from their foot health, and the herding was by and large very uneventful, and there were lots of positives to report there. But as we got to the collecting yard, there was a dog leg bend into the collecting yard, and some quite narrow twists and turns there, and so that clearly this was an area to consider and to talk about with the team later. There was an almost 180-degree turn out of the parlour, and while there's plenty of width here, it is quite a turn that a lot of cows were making 3 times a day. So that was an area that we wanted to really talk about in the later action planning step. So after looking at all the facilities on the farm and looking at the footbath here, we've got there's one footbath on the left here, which I got very excited about, because actually this fits the ideal model of a footbath according to the Wisconsin style of footbath. Something that I picked up subsequently with Grant was maybe a bit of sheeting on the left-hand side would help just prevent the risk of any cows putting a left-hand foot there on the curb on the left. But a long, narrow footbath, meaning that volume of biocide, of formalin in this case, in this footbath, was going to have maximum washing and contact time with that foot. So you get at least 2 foot plunges per foot going through that footbath to achieve that maximum washing effect. But then there's another footbath, again, apologies for the quality of the picture, another footbath on the right that was much shorter and wider, and actually a lot of the cows were going through that footbath. So we talked about the idea that we could maybe redesign that footbath according to the model dimensions, which are presented here. This is the Nigel Cook and team at Wisconsin proposed optimal footbath, which is long and narrowed down. So with a big step going in, so a 28-centimeter curb going in, and at least 3 meters long, and ideally closer to 4 meters to get that maximum number of bunks in. So we talked about that as part of that exercise, and I like to see a partition partway along the footpath so that we end up with 2 compartments, but I would have 4 men in both. And we sort of talked around all of that, and here's an example of that footpath design here in the UK. And of course, one of the things that we discussed was the idea that maybe we could still have a double width footpath and have two bars in parallel linked up, so that we've got a better cow flow for those cows going through there. So the idea of this is that I'm not there to advise, I'm there to direct some of the discussion. So we convened at the end of my sort of assessment of the farm according to the checklist, and came back and talked through some of the ideas that might improve the foot health at Trebersed, and we generated this list through a very open discussion. I used an opening question technique we call facilitation, just to generate some thoughts and ideas with Jen and Grant. I then went away and pulled together some of the numbers from the records, which really confirmed the priorities, and reconvened a discussion then a few weeks later. So from the data, digital dermatitis and white lines both looked like the priority to address. So if we come back to the lameness map and we plot the numbers on the lameness map, it was still pointing towards the robust foot and the forces on the feet as being a priority, but also perhaps highlighting that we shouldn't take our eye off the infection pressure. So coming back to our action plan, we really emphasised actually probably looking at tightening up on the digital dermatitis control would be a useful exercise to do, but also reinforcing some of the elements that we talked about earlier to do with improving the reducing the forces on the feet. So looking at refresher training on the cow handling for the milking team, looking to improve the surfaces under the feet with the use of some rubber matting in through the collecting yard and the parlour exit, and reintroducing biotin into the ration at 20 milligrams per head per day to improve the robustness of the hoof horn and the foot. So at this point, this is Grant and the Trebersed team's action plan. This was ideas that came out through discussion with Grant's vet and the foot trimmer, and we really tried to make this as much of a sort of a team discussion as possible. Not the same level of brainstorming that we would do within the Healthy Feet program, but something that really hopefully got to the things that we all felt as a team would be a priority, and really focusing on things that were practical and achievable for the farm to do within the timeframes that they thought were realistic for that farm. So at this point, I want to just say oh yes, I should say before moving on back to Grant. Grant, in discussion with Grant and the team, we thought actually it'd be quite useful to get some extra mobility scores rather than just one at the start and one 12 months later. It'd be quite useful to get some quarterly mobility scores in there just to plot progress. And so Anna came back in October. There've been some challenges through the summer. There'd been a lot of heat last summer. You'll all recall that it was a hot summer and there was some heat stress. And so we perhaps weren't all that surprised that things looked slightly worse come October, given the heat stress that we'd seen through August and September. But thankfully by December, cows had really bedded into the winter routine by the looks of it, and foot health was really starting to improve. And this really reinforces the point I want to make, that we need to take a long-term view on foot health and not panic when things don't look like they're going right immediately. And obviously mobility scores can improve and deteriorate according to the seasonal conditions. So I'm just going to finish up my bit by saying the Healthy Feet program has been put together by a whole team of people, and I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that's gone in by a number of people, especially the AHDB team. There's been a huge amount of effort there by AHDB. Thanks to Anna for doing the mobility score, and thank you to her for being a high sensitivity scorer, because I think that's important. And then a number of other people, including Owen, Sarah, and David Main and Lisa, but also the mobility steering group. So just want to hand back to Grant to now just talk about what the team at Trebersed did after the visit. Yes.
Come in with
Jamie.
a couple of questions that have come in from our audience before we do go back to Grant, a couple of sort of technical ones on the foot bathing. Some people have been seeing chat on YouTube and on the internet about using fairy liquid in foot baths. What's your thoughts on that, Nick, please?
Thank you for that question. That's a really great question. So foot bathing is all about cleaning and disinfecting the feet, and I really place a big emphasis on the cleaning aspect of it, because there have been a number of studies now that have shown detergent can be effective compared with nothing. So detergent in the foot bath can be very useful for just helping clean the feet, and of course the cleaner foot will be much more responsive to whatever biocide might be in there. So the addition of a detergent, and of course that you can use fairy liquid. There are other commercial detergents available on the market, so I'm not wedded to fairy liquid, but a detergent in with formalin or copper sulfate will help improve the cleaning effect. And of course you could, in discussion with your appropriate advisor, you could come up with a foot bathing regime that involved alternating, perhaps doing a detergent wash followed by a formalin or copper sulfate or whatever biocide you might want to use. Of course, it's important to say whatever biocide you use, it's better to use one that we know is effective. At the moment, formalin is a licensed biocide. Copper sulfate, interestingly, isn't a licensed biocide. There are a number of other biocides that we can use out there. But back to the question, I think detergent is a very good idea, but not used on its own. I think it would be unrealistic to expect the fairy liquid to do the job that maybe one of the other more potent biocides would do in terms of killing off the bugs that cause digital dermatitis.
Okay, thanks for that. That is interesting. And we also had another one asking, what does biotin do? Because that was on the action plan for Grant to reintroduce it.
Yeah, so biotin is we call it vitamin H, but it's actually one of the vitamin B family, and it's quite a significant contributor to claw horn quality. Now, a cow that is on a high forage, high scratch factor type diet will actually make quite a bit of its own biotin. So it's naturally synthesized within the healthy rumen. And actually, there's been a lot of speculation that your grazed cow that's most of its nutritional requirements are provided through grazing probably isn't going to benefit from an awful lot of biotin supplementation. But the cow that's particularly on a maize-based ration with a lot of concentrate going into the diet might actually have that natural biotin synthesis impaired, and that there's a good body of evidence to show supplementation at 20 milligrams per head per day does improve claw horn health and will reduce the incidence of white line lameness by roughly 50% in one study. So if white line is a problem and maize and concentrate levels are quite high within the ration, then I think there's a strong rationale to supplement with biotin, and there appears to be a yield benefit to it that seems to offset some of the cost of it. So so that one seems a fairly straightforward one to add into the ration.
Okay, we're having quite a few questions coming in, but you're actually answering them as you go along, Nick. But we have got one here on Grant's action plan. It put the initial check at 70 days. So what's the thought process behind 70 days?
Well, we don't know what is the optimal for all farms, and there's always, I always believe the best researchers are dairy farmers, because you're having to try things and evaluate whether they're working all the time. And it was just something I'd noted, that there was a 100-day foot check going on, and we were maybe picking up some of the sole ulcers just a little bit too late at that stage. And it was just a thought that I raised, is where did we think was the optimal for picking up the cow that was maybe at the bruised stage before it progressed on to a sole ulcer. And so 10 weeks looks looked about right for this herd, but it's something that you have to evaluate on a herd by herd basis. And so I'm quite careful not to make any blanket recommendations, but I do think that foot check at some point in early lactation is a positive one. And the indications from some of the work, so a recent observational study from Liverpool University suggested that maybe earlier in lactation is probably going to be better, but we don't want to be too early so that we're interfering with cows when they're still sort of just in the fresh cow period and still recovering from the calving effect. So we know that the strength of that laminar attachment is compromised probably for a few weeks longer than we ever imagined. So I would tend to say don't try too much within 42 days of calving. So 10 weeks seems to be about a good compromise.
So another question very similar, Nick, is that one farmer is saying that they trim at drying off, that's their standard. How important is a second trim, and if so, when? So
another great question, and thank you everyone for these are really good questions. So I think what we call the pre-dry foot trim or foot check, I think that it's probably good to use the terminology foot check, although invariably we do a little bit of trimming with every foot that we check. I think the pre-dry check is really valuable to set that cow up ready for that high risk period around calving, because we know that's when the foot is under most challenge. We get the weakening of that laminar attachment, and that predisposes the cow to bruising, and then white lines and sole ulcers further down the line. So that one's a really good one. So keep on with that one. And then the early lactation foot check, I think for most herds it's a relatively straightforward one to justify. If you are a very low prevalence herd, so if you really don't see a lot of lameness through lactation, then of course there's probably no need to do it. It's not as much there to improve foot angle, but it's more to detect the sole overgrowth, that overgrowth you get in the middle of the sole, and to try and address some of the bruising. So it's as much to pick up some of the lesions that might have developed in that fresh cow period.
Excellent.
Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, perfect. I think we were just about to hand over to Grant to sort of hear some of your perspective of how going through the process of the Healthy Feet Light was at Trebersed.
Thank you. Hannah, hand back to Grant.
We still can't hear you, Grant, I'm afraid. Oh. We can see your slides now, so that's good. You're still on mute. Still on mute.
Says you are unmuted.
There we go. There you are.
I think
Perfect.
you muted me. Is that better? Great.
Sorry.
Okay, right. We will carry on with the slides. So if you remember, before I handed over to Nick, we were talking about the old grooving, and then following our initial conversation and meetings with Nick, we went about grooving the yards, particularly of the new buildings. So this is an outside loafing yard for the 400 cow building that you saw with the long day lighting. Probably relevant to say at this stage that whilst the dry cows are in 2-row barns, the milking cow buildings have been built as 3-row barns. But to maximise animal welfare, we've given each building a loafing area outside, which increases the feed area by 20 foot each side and along the whole front of the building. So whilst they're 3-row barns, the cows have access either end of the building to these outside loafing yards. And in the summer, typically these were the areas that got very dry with slowly getting dry in hot weather. And this is where we got a lot of sort of the casualties taking place, particularly with cows bulling. They like to bull outside. So we saw a really big difference by carrying out this strategic grooving on these yards. And the full length of the building was grooved. And if we home in and look at it up close, that's effectively what it looks like. So we're particularly pleased with the work we carried out. But it's not cheap, and we did get presented with quite a large bill for having carried out this exercise. The cost of the grooving that we carried out was £5.50 per metre squared. The area that we grooved was just over just under 2,500 metres squared worth, giving us a total bill of 13,500. So how did we justify that? Well, if we go back to the casualties slide that I showed you at the beginning, and we're making some assumptions, but if those casualty numbers that we had in April and May continued through June, July, August and September, and we had 5 per month, potentially we were looking at an additional 16 sort of cow casualties over that period. You could even argue in the extreme heat of July and August that they may have even increased further. So on that basis, I'm suggesting that for that cost of 13,500, we potentially saved a minimum of 16 cows in the June to September period, and they're cows that we actually would have lost from the herd. In addition, there would have been others that would have done the splits and ended up with shackles. And as you all know, it's pretty demoralising having to sort of deal with cows under distress like that. So if we valued 16 cows at typically £1,500 a head, potentially, I'm suggesting the number of cows that we saved has covered that cost of grooving probably within about 3 months. So a return that I'm sort of satisfied in my mind has been well worth it. In addition to cow welfare, which has significantly been improved. Moving on to the next area that we addressed following the action plan that Nick came up with for us, and that was the matting of strategic areas following the incidence of white line. And the objective was to look at target the areas that need rubber matting, where the cows are particularly turning 90 degrees, where they're standing for longer periods, to reduce the incidence of white line. And this is a photo, I think, of the front of the parlour that Nick may have shown earlier on in his slides. The cows come out of the herringbone parlour here, and whilst it's been built with a large enough area, both sides have to turn 90 degrees to the left as they walk out. So 3 times a day, there's a lot of pressure on the hoof in this section of the parlour. So we covered this area with the rubber matting that Nick suggested, and the collecting yard likewise. So we did the 30-foot behind the back of the milking parlour, and we did the walkways of the cow standings of the milking parlour as well. The cost of the matting, so the matting that we went for cost £38 per metre squared. The area that we did was 128.5 metres squared, giving us a bill of just under £4,900. So how do we work out a cost benefit of that? Remember that the cost benefit was to look at the reduction in white line. Well, this really is work in progress because we haven't got a 12-month data to share on that at this stage, but I'm sure that will show a fantastic return. But the loading and exit times from the parlour was significantly improved. And whilst we were told by the company that sold the rubber matting to us that this would improve, we certainly didn't put it in for this reason. But we've had a significant increase to cow loading times. And if this works properly, I'll just show a video. And I just took this last night. I went out at night milking and just took one side of cows coming onto the Parlour. And we never used to get cows loading onto the Parlour in this fashion. The cows are flat rate fed outside, a high level of concentrate. Although we've got Parlour feeders, they're only fed half a kilo per milking in the Parlour, so they're not being encouraged in through feed. Yet, as you saw there, that row of cows came skipping into the Parlour quite quickly. We save 20 to 30 minutes per milking, which is great. And if we look at 3 times a day, that's an hour a day. There's 3 staff on each shift, so we're saving 3 hours of labour per day for this rubber matting, as well as the other benefits. If we just put a nominal £10 an hour, that's £30 a day, or £900 a month, which paid back on labour alone is about 5.5 months, and we've yet to get the benefits or see the cost benefits of the reduction in white line. So another investment I'm really pleased at, and I think the next strategy there is to look at the next area that we should prioritise in putting in some more rubber matting.
Grant,
so next phases.
You were putting matting at the back of the Parlour. Are you scraping that with a tractor then, or just hosing it down? How do you manage that?
Yeah, good question, Jamie. And it was something that I asked the company before putting the matting in. The matting will take a scraper as long as it runs in a straight line. So we can scrape straight off that matting using a tractor and scraper, but you mustn't turn on the matting. If you turn, the screwing action will damage the matting.
Okay, and we've had some other questions about the direction of the grooves as well, and how difficult it is to choose a direction to either go with cow flow, or whether you end up being perpendicular to your feed troughs. So what was your best fit, and which direction did you go with?
Okay, we went with the direction of cow traffic, the way the cows move around the yards. But perhaps that might be a question to go back to Nick with either now or later.
So I could answer that one very quickly and simplistically, and so the direction of the cow flow seems to be critical, but the cow always ends up with a foot in contact with the groove, and that's probably the key thing. And so we get a little bit focused on which direction that groove is going in, but as long as the cow's in contact with the groove, she usually gets some purchase and stops that initial slip.
And there's another one similar but different. Someone's got a sloped loafing yard and they're about to re-groove, so would they go up and down the slope or with the slope?
That's a really difficult question, and I talked to someone about this the other night. I don't think we've got the answer to that one. I suspect, I'd need to take a look at the slope. I think it's probably just one of those things you've got. It might be an experiment. It might be that you have to try a bit and just see how the cows into it. But that's a really good question. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one. What I've noticed though is sometimes where we've got a slippery slope, then actually steps can be better if there's a way of generating steps. I know that's not always going to be a straightforward answer, or that there's some specifically designed rubber matting produced by Kreiberg. It's called Monta, and that's worked really well in a few situations, but of course that might not be easy to maintain if it's an area that needs to be scraped or it's a large area.
And we've got a few people asking about the width of grooves. Nick, you did include some measurements in your presentation, but is there a particular width and depth that the grooves need to be, or a maximum width that they should be?
The absolute maximum, I think, is 19 millimeters. But it's probably more important that it is a diamond cut groove. You want to have that sharpness of edge. And it sounds sounds bad, doesn't it? A sharp edge. You think that would be bad for the cow's foot, but actually that creates the stability for the foot to rest on. Where we get the problems is where there's a jagged edge, and that creates sharp points on the cow's foot. So 19 millimeters would be the absolute maximum, and then as deep as you can go, and that depth is quite, I think, quite important. But you know, obviously you don't want to go right the way through the concrete, but by deep as you can go, then you're talking about 10 millimeters deep, and that will just pull some of that moisture off the surface quite effectively.
Thank you, Grant. We will let you move into the next phase.
Great. Okay, no, it's fantastic to have such good questions as we go through. So next phases. Well, I think we've got to address this foot bath. So this is the foot bath that Nick showed earlier on, sort of taken from a different angle. So this is the exit area of the parlour. We open that 5-bar gate and cows walk through on their way back to the buildings. But as you can see, they're almost going across it. They're getting one dunk at very best. And we do know that that is a weakness of ours. So the suggestion is to knock out the concrete block wall that you can see, and probably put 2 foot baths in parallel, as Nick showed in his diagram, and then gate off an area to make out exit through a longer parallel foot bath to get the better foot trimming results. So that's one of our next aims, which probably just brings me to conclusions. So the initiative started in response to one issue, and that was the number of casualties, hence the phone call to Nick. We addressed, we sort of joined the Healthy Feet Light programme, which was basically a proactive approach to looking at all areas of lameness, not just the casualties. It's been embraced by our whole team. So we involved the staff, the herd manager, the assistant herd manager, the foot trimmer, the vet, and I think it's really important to do that. Everyone feels their involvement, and also when you get some positive results, as we did when we carried out the mobility scoring in December with a 10% improvement in lameness. It's really good for the morale of the team, and they can see that the changes that we're making are having results, and I was particularly pleased about that. So that's staff morale, and of course animal welfare, which is really important to all of us. And I think as an industry, we need to continually work to further improve mobility of cows going forward. And that's all for me. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Grant. It's really good to have a case study, which is, you know, a real farm, and you've got a mixture of newer buildings and older buildings that have needed to be sort of a little bit adapted. So it's, you know, really positive to see that adaptations can be made to what people have got without spending an absolute fortune on these things. So thank you for sharing your case study. We have got quite a few other questions coming in. So people are interested in whether slats cause a particular challenge to mobility.
Okay, so did you want me to answer that one? Because Grant, I don't think you've got any slats apart from, actually there's a small slatted area leading up to the foot bath, which I actually really like, because it means that area leading up to the foot bath stays cleaner and drier, so that the foot going into the foot bath should theoretically be cleaner and drier. So that's probably the only area I really like to see slats. The difficulty with slats is that you've got often the concrete bit of the slat becomes slippery, and then you've got a fairly wide groove, and it is the classic situation where you see cows slipping and then catching, and it's that slip catch type movement that we think is one of the main contributors of white lines. So highly relevant to a lot of discussions about white line control. Now you can groove slats, and you can apply various techniques to introduce a texture onto that slat, but invariably the concrete is probably a little bit wider than ideal, and the gap is a little bit wider than ideal. So it's probably generating some abnormal forces. Now, of course, what is ideal is always going to be a challenge, and cows on concrete is a situation we just have to manage, and even grooving is there are costs and benefits to everything that you do, and upsides and downsides. And even with grooving, we know that the grooving does generate some uneven forces. So it's about doing something that's enough to provide grip, but not too much that generates uneven forces. So hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. I think we've just about got time for this one last question. Somebody's asking about the benefits of the rubber mats, and whether, in both of your opinions, it could be financially viable to actually rubber mat all areas of cow flow and housing.
Did you want to have a go at that one, Grant? I'm guessing.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was certainly something that we're considering. We wanted to see initially what sort of cost benefit we had from it. So as seen by my calculations, I'm more than confident that we've had a good sort of return on investment for what we've done already. The next step for us is to identify the area of next importance, and we've got one row of cubicles next to the parlour where we house our fresh cows, and the thinking is to carry that to rubber mat that area next, and then from there roll it on further. Probably a question I got for Nick on that basis is if by doing more areas, particularly the larger cow buildings, would we run the risk of, particularly in the summer months, would some cows tend to lie out? At the moment, we don't get any of that because the sand beds are so comfortable, but with rubber matting outside, would that be a concern?
Yes, of course, that is a concern, and it's then providing a type of rubber matting that is not perhaps as inviting to lie on as the matting that you've used through the parlour. So you used a product called Animat, which is very soft and comfortable and hard wearing as well, and works quite well in that around the parlour situation, and would work well, I would suggest, in your fresh group as well. There are various types of rubber matting product, and I don't want to name them all and go through them all. There's one particular type of product that works very well along feed passages because it's a little bit firmer but still provides the cushioning that you would want from rubber matting. So that's probably what I would be exploring. But I just want to pick up on the point you made there, Grant, that you probably want to be strategic with your use of rubber matting. While concrete maybe isn't the ideal surface for cows' feet, the rubber matting has disadvantages as well. You mentioned one of them with cows lying out, but you'll see there's generally a little bit more moisture on rubber matting, and actually the groove that we put in concrete pulls some of the moisture off the surface, and concrete will actually in many ways provide a cleaner surface for cows to walk on. And sometimes we will see more digital dermatitis where there's a lot more rubber matting in and around the housing. So you have to weigh all these things up. There's no ideal in these situations. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you very much for answering all of these questions, and we've had some really good questions come in. So I think really it just remains for me to say a huge thank you to both of our speakers today, both Nick and Grant. It's been really good to hear about some positive impacts on a real farm, you know, both the welfare and the profitability point of view. And thanks for, you know, being so honest with the numbers. It's quite inspiring, and it's really good to know that taking a proactive approach can really make a difference. So our watchers are looking at a screenshot now of part of the AHDB website. So if you're interested in hearing more about the Healthy Feet Light programme, then do go and have a look on the AHDB website for that. We've got a range of other support related to mobility as well. So we've got lesion scorecards, we've got mobility scoring scorecards, and we do actually have a series of webinars coming up shortly on cattle handling, which, when we've been talking about cow flow today, I think that all kind of contributes to improving cow mobility. Apologies, my slides are not moving on, and I don't know why not. So, okay, here we go. So those webinars are taking place. The first one is with Temple Grandin on the 1st of February. The next one with Neil Chesterton from New Zealand on the 16th of February, and we've got Yup Driessen on the 2nd of March. We've also got a webinar focusing specifically on controlling digital dermatitis, and I know we had a couple of questions come in today about Digi, and we haven't been able to take them all. So if that's of interest to you, then do take a look. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And just a reminder to our listeners that if you're watching on YouTube, please do hit subscribe. And AHDB have released their 5-year strategy at the moment, and there is an opportunity to feed in on our consultation before the 31st of January 2021. So if you would like to feed in, then again, go onto the AHDB website where there's more information. Thanks for joining us, and we wish everybody all the best with improving the mobility of your herd, and do check out the AHDB website for more detail about the Healthy Feet programme and other mobility resources.